So today we're going to talk about shared print, and I will, maybe we'll go. So here's our session overview, and I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that we've been doing for stewarding the collective collection. That's the umbrella term we have used, and we looked at retention commitments. And that report is available now. And so you will see on the slides, I'll have these subliminal messages of QR codes and URLs that you can get access to those reports. So I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about them because I want you to look at them yourselves. And then we have another project on the data, tools, and workflows that actually involved humans, and many of you may have been involved in those projects. And I will talk about the results from the interviews as well as the online survey. And Skelk was instrumental in partnering with us for this project to recruit, allow us to interview at their conference. So we couldn't have done it without all of our colleagues in Skelk. Then we're going to have our panelists talk about their perspectives in regard to the work they're doing. And then, as I said, we want to have a discussion. A lot of words on some of these slides, so I am not going to read to you since I know you all are capable of that. But as I said, I wanted to start by defining collective collections. And this definition is from a paper that was published in 2020, and it was my colleagues Brian Lavoie, Lorcan Dempsey, and Constance Malpas. And so basically, collective collections are the combined holdings of a group of libraries. And this is a very important part of our library environment because it demonstrates collaboration and coordination among libraries. And so those are the things that I really think that we want to talk about and think about when we hear some of these findings. Also, collective collections demonstrate libraries at scale. So what we did is we have the title, Stewarding the Collective Collection. That's the whole umbrella for these projects. And we have a long history of looking at collective collections and shared print. And that's the block that I say, understanding the collective collection. So we talked a lot about the conceptualization of collective collections, the theory of collective collections, but we didn't talk about that practice. And so that's what we're doing now. With these two projects, the one I mentioned, the retention commitments that was done with the partnership, and the workflows, data, and tools. And this is just to entice you to read the report. There's no way you can read that map. But this data analysis was basically surveying this broad landscape of shared print. And so what they were looking at is trying to understand the retention commitments. And these commitments were from US and Canadian libraries. And we looked at 17 shared print, US and Canadian monographic shared print programs. And we analyzed the monograph print retentions registered in OCLC's WorldCat database. And then we looked at them in the broader context of the print monograph holdings in WorldCat. And as I said, the URL is at the bottom, but I'll keep giving you this message. And at the end, there will also be a QR code. So what did we learn? Basically, retention commitments often have an expiration date, which you know and we heard loud and clear in our interviews and in our survey data. And we need to look at those, and we need to renew those commitments. And maybe some don't need to be renewed, but we have to make those decisions on what commitments need to be renewed and what don't. And we need to increase the rate of retention commitment registrations, because as we continue to do these analyses, they need to be up to date and accurate. And so even this snapshot that we have in this new report may not be accurate if your data aren't accurate. So again, I'm not telling you anything new, but this is something we also heard very loud and clear in the second part of this study. So this part is the US and Canadian perspectives on workflows, data, and tools for shared print. So these are our research questions. We wanted to know, what are the key workflows supporting stewardship of shared print collections? What data and tools are currently used to support these workflows? And what gaps are there in the data tools or other resources that exist? The methodology, we conducted individual and focus group interviews. And we had a survey. We had 337 respondents from the survey, which I think is pretty good for this very niche area. And so we sent the survey and recruited through our colleagues at Skelk, through listservs. We looked at metadata librarians, resource sharing librarians, deans and directors, and also collections librarians. The questions were different depending upon the role that the individual played. And so, as you can imagine, the dean's directors were at a more strategic level. We also, in our interviews, we had individual interviews with managers of shared print collections. And I don't want to say names of individuals because we want to keep those private and anonymous, but if anyone wants to volunteer that they were involved in this, that's okay as well. And so what did we learn? Well, some of the significant findings with the interviews were that the key workflows are, guess what? Metadata management, big surprise. Next, collection analysis, managing offsite storage, verification. So our catalog, our records indicate we have this item, but do we hold this item? And that was what kept coming up. A lot of time is spent tracking down the item. Also, discovery, access, and delivery of these items. Some of the challenges, benchmarking, staffing. We heard a lot about staffing. Sometimes it's ad hoc. Sometimes there's one person that's dedicated. I was just reading something today about another study, from another study, not in this area, but talking about how it's ad hoc staff, it's full-time staff, it's part-time staff, and so that's what we heard as well. Facilities. You know, we don't have the facilities, or we have some shared storage area, and then we can't get to it, or things like that were challenges. Digitization. Why? How do you determine what you digitize, and who pays for that cost? I see many of you nodding. Again, the challenges, data quality. Technical interoperability. We learned that institutions may not just belong to one shared print program, but multiple shared print programs. And so the systems do not talk to each other. The resource sharing systems may not talk to each other. This one surprised me, a lack of a community of practice. And that really did. That was a surprising one. I don't know, was it surprising to anyone else or no?
Makes sense.
Okay, because I thought this was a very close-knit community, but that came out loud and clear. These cross-program coordinations, you require one thing for one program and another thing for another, so sometimes we're duplicating work, sometimes we're adding to the work. And also, it's very difficult to integrate the workflows for shared print with the local workflows. The other thing we heard was for data needs, holdings. Holdings aren't accurate. Keeps coming up. It all leads to metadata. Retention commitments weren't up to date. And sometimes they weren't reviewed, and some were expiring, and nobody had any plans to look at them or to think about what we do next. The bibliographic data again, and usage. They really wanted more usage data. Like, is it worth keeping some of these things? Or should we be digitizing them? And these were some of the questions. Preservation came up as well. The functionality needs a lot of data cleaning, and as you all know, that can be very tedious. They wanted to streamline data updates, the analytics and decision support. They really felt that they needed that, and also this integration of systems. And so when we look at the survey findings, again, you will see in the top, your top right, the key workflows from the interviews, and then you look at the key, the data for shared print from the survey, and you'll see that many of these things are the same, which as a researcher made me feel really good, because you always worry that, you're hand-picking people. We have these convenience samples for interviews, and do these individuals really represent a broader population? We do not have a random sample. They're very difficult to get right now, but with our quantitative data from the survey of 337 respondents, we see a lot of these same things. The metadata activities are very important, creating, updating metadata, verifying holdings, inventory data, collection analysis, so comparing the collection against others, inaccurate, non-current data are the challenges, incomplete data, and incompatible data formats. We also, our next steps are, we have all the data now analyzed, and we are writing it up. We will disseminate the findings. We hope to have webinars, some other presentations, publications, but we will keep you informed because as I've said, we've finished analyzing the data. There are a lot of nuances, which I haven't gotten into because I think I'm already over my time. But you can look at the differences between those different actors, so deans and directors versus collection librarians. One of the things we heard from collection librarians in the interviews that I haven't really talked about here was that need to really promote this and educate institutions, governing boards, or provosts, so that they understand the importance of shared print collections. And that came up a lot in the interviews. Now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. And so first is Eva. Thank you.
So I'm just going to offer some perspective from one of the libraries who I think participated in the study and how this translates in a real way to our library. So hello, I'm Eva from the University of Toronto Libraries. Really quickly, some context settings. The University of Toronto Libraries is the largest academic library collection in Canada. And amongst the top 5 in North America, as well as our campus libraries, we also have a high-density storage and preservation facility called Keep at Downsview that we share with 5 other Canadian academic libraries. We're members of the Shared Print Partnership and North Node, the Canadian Shared Print Network. And as an institution, we're deeply committed to the idea of building collaborative collections and shared print. It's a very important part of our path forward. And already, some of what was said really resonated to us. One of the great things about Ontario is that we have worked closely together for a very long time as part of OCL, the Ontario Consortium of University Libraries. 19 of those 22 libraries share an ALMA instance, which is great. Unfortunately, we are one of the libraries who does not participate in that shared instance. With our shared preservation facility, 4 of those libraries are part of that shared instance of ALMA. We are not one of them. And then there's another library that's not in Ontario at all. So we have all these intersecting Venn diagram. There's always folks on the outside, and that really complicates things. So with the qualitative findings, some of the themes that really resonated with us, collection analysis has been such a large part of this work. And it's a process of ongoing experimentation. We haven't found something that works really well. So we have used Gold Rush. We have used OCLC, Green Glass a couple of different times. We make heavy use of the ALMA overlap tool, and also really homegrown tools depending on the use case. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And it's been a huge investment both in financial resources and time resources. And then benchmarking is something that came up, especially as the largest fish in a given pond. None of the existing analysis tools offer a solve for us because a lot of the data about what exists in the universe of content is wrapped up in proprietary systems. So, it lives in WorldCat or it lives in Gobi or something like that. And there are actors who have access to this data, but there's not a good way for us to export that and mine it for, a particular use case that we have on a day. Sorry, I'm rushing through to get us back on time. So other things that resonated with us. So the bibliographic data need, we do have the technical capacity to analyze bibliographic data, but we have massive data cleanliness issues, which I'm sure resonate with you all. When we're trying to understand an overlapper who owns issues of particular serials or even standing orders, but these materials haven't been itemized over time, it means there's a years-long investment in the remediation of that. AI is helping with that a little bit in order to even get started on this work. And then the need for integrated system. We're working with a variety of systems, and there's no easy way to integrate real-time data with our project partners. Even something like WorldCat, we're one of the worst libraries probably in the world at re-uploading our data and refreshing that. So we complain about these things, but we don't do anything about it. So I'm going to talk about a couple of case studies and kind of provide some real world examples. And for the Canadians in the room, I think there's a couple of you, this first one will be familiar. It's a retrospective shared print project for government documents. So the Canadian Government Documents Project seeks to ensure that a target number of copies, when possible, of monographs that were identified in an overlap study for federal government documents are retained by participating libraries. So we aim to have 1 preservation copy in Library and Archives Canada and 4 circulating copies in the holdings of other participating libraries. We're aiming for geographical diversity for where that target number of copies are. So we used data from a Green Glass national overlap study to begin that work, but that really had to be supplemented. And, we had a data librarian who took a year-long research leave to really be able to work with that data and for us to identify those copies. So it's just not feasible in most situations. So we decided that 4 copies would work for us across the country. They had to be geographically dispersed. There was a preference for preservation facilities that wasn't always possible. So, the ability to maintain an environment of 30 to 70% relative humidity, less than 24 degrees, sensitive, like all the preservation facility stuff. I'm not going to go through the details. So what was nice was when those copies were moved to a preservation facility, that means that you were able to say that, yes, the material is here. Somebody has physically had a hand on it. So we were able to confirm, but not in every case were the materials moved to a preservation facility. So that's a consideration. Those materials are left as circulating copies. And retention commitments will be registered in the 583 field, and the library is recommended to register commitments with OCLC. So you're seeing a lot of what you heard in the study, a lot of these steps, and this one, works pretty well. Again, the Canadians in the room, don't tell me all the ways that this is a heavy lift for libraries and maybe isn't working. And then one that works not less well, but really reveals some of the complications and the gaps. So at the same time, we've been working on a prospective shared print project for music scores. And it's a real example of how this all breaks down. So working with 5 libraries with music programs in Ontario and Newfoundland, we asked participants to submit holdings information so we could find where there were areas of overlap. Massive failure, didn't work at all, because music scores are one of these areas where we buy in series, and the cataloging practices of them over time were just so widely dispersed that it wound up having to be a totally manual process, and just relied on the knowledge of our music librarians to identify a series, some series that could be collectively collected. With no integration of our systems, there was no way to know to share information about purchasing. So we're really relying on each library to separately make a note on POLs and, remember to do that and align with local practices. For metadata exchange, so say, Western University is buying this, but it's also part of my collection. No workflow in place for the libraries that were part of that shared ALMA instance. It's really easy because they have great resource sharing systems. But where to note that this is part of a shared collection, we were thinking about, this doesn't quite make sense for a retention statement, but we want to know that we shouldn't cancel this because it impacts another library, nowhere to note that. And what about the digitization of these materials? Early on, we thought that they would be a good candidate for controlled digital lending, perhaps. Recent changes have perhaps dissuaded us from that. So, you see 2 different examples of these types of workflows where it works well and where it really reveals the challenges of trying to do this type of work at scale. Over to you.
Okay. Thanks for getting us on track.
You're good. You can talk fast.
There we go. Hi, everybody. My name is Rena Red, and I'm the Director of Collection Strategies at Clemson University. And I'm just going to share some thoughts and questions about the report and give a little bit of context about Clemson's history in terms of shared print. Prior to this year, or actually last year, we had one retention commitment through the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries, and that was for a set of NUCs, the National Union Catalog. That was it. We were commitment phobic, I think. And we didn't have the personnel, which is something that Lynn mentioned. Personnel is needed for these commitments and to do this work. So now we, through our state system, Pascal, the partnership among South Carolina academic libraries, we have joined EAST. Thank you, Tina. And we have dove right in. So now I'll dive right in. So this was my chance to play with maps. Where are we in library land? Let's pretend like South Carolina is library land. And we are in Charleston, which I'm going to call Collection City. So if you look at the image on the right, that is actually very, very close to where we are. And so, yeah, thanks for looking at my map pictures. So my intersection, I like to call this an intersection because if you're standing at 4 corners of an intersection, every person on that corner is going to see something different. So this is my corner. My corner is based on my background in resource sharing. That's what I first started doing at Clemson, was being in charge of interlibrary loan and collections management and the data that is needed for both of those things, because it is integral. If we're talking shared print, there has to actually be sharing. Right? Okay, there we go. So my questions are, in regard to resource sharing, how can we most effectively share what we commit to retain? And we do this in interlibrary loan through consortia, through reciprocal agreements, things like that, through working with OCLC to file, our group affiliations and things of that nature. And doing this through these groups is very scalable, which is wonderful, and it's scalable for interlibrary loan, it's scalable for print retention. However, some of kind of the rock stars in the resource sharing world, Lars Leon and Tom Bruno, they have often alluded to the sense of walled gardens. And this is what we have to be wary of in the land of shared print. Are we creating walled gardens where I have to go knock on your door and say, hey, can I jump the fence? Can I use this stuff? So we have to be really wary of that when we talk about sharing what we have. And then the other instance in sharing is, how are we sustainable, equitable, and affordable? Because not everybody has the privileges that we have as primary academic libraries. Not all academic libraries can afford to work on the scale and support these initiatives that we can. And as librarians, we all have a commitment, of course, ethically, to make sure that people can get the information we need. So how does this work on that scale? If you go to a smaller library that does not have as many resources, and maybe you can't afford to join a group, how are we going to serve these people? So that's a huge thing for me. Let's see, what else? The other thing is in terms of discoverability and sharing. Lynn mentioned, and Eva mentioned interoperability. Again, just like resource sharing, you have different people using different institutions, using different systems, and the interoperability, regardless of what it is, what they can afford to pay, that is of utmost importance. So then collection management, how do we work among multiple groups doing the similar work? Who coordinates it? So right now, from the resource sharing resource sharing, say that 20 times quickly, standpoint and shared print, I go to OCLC a lot for their data, and I really appreciate that through the registries and the profile groups. It's reliable data. I really appreciate that. In terms of shared storage, what group is working on that? ALA Core has a shared storage interest group. As far as I know, that might be one of the only national groups. We met in San Diego, and Kathy at the Library of Congress, I can't remember her name. Martina, yep. You say it, yeah. Anyway, she has led that, and she has worked on the West Coast with West, literally. And she has a great holistic knowledge of how this works. And, it was funny, we had a small group, but we were talking about, wouldn't it be great if we just, had regional repositories that, again, regardless of the scope and scale of your institution, you could still participate. And again, have equitable, actually like geographic access to materials. So again, that's the magic wand wish of those of us who deal with offsite storage. So then the other thing is, how do we build trust for this work? And here's the deal. As somebody doing this work, I trust the people who I work with in other groups. The trust issue is with our collection development and like subject liaison librarians. When I'm talking to my colleague Camille at Cooper, hi, there she is, thank you. She didn't know I was gonna call on her, but when she sees that a retention commitment is gonna expire, that is a very negative effect that corrodes that trust that we build. So I think, and we all know that time flies, especially when you're having fun. So if you're gonna make this commitment, consider doing it longer. It's easy to kick the can, but it is gonna affect the trust that is built. And the second element of trust is, we need to develop a relationship of trust with administrators who are advocating for us to get the resources to do this work. I am trusting my dean, and I hope he is trusting me so that he can go to our provost and our board of trustees and all of those people to make that case for us. So in the last minute, how can we access reliable data about who's retaining what? How can we access reliable data about the retained material itself? As I mentioned before, for my money today, OCLC is what I go to for that. And then how do we leverage that for optimal resource sharing and collection management? Again, interoperability, scalability, affordability, I think those are the things that we have to look to. And the last thought that I will share with you is, it occurred to me, we could be witnessing a sea change in how print is actually viewed, where electronic is the norm and print goes into the kind of semi-rare, medium rare area. And maybe that helps us advocate our case for more funding and things of that nature with administrators. If print maybe can be like fetishized a little bit, we might actually get to where we're going. But it occurred to me, maybe this is a sea change about how we think about print and its use in our libraries. So I'll turn it over to Terry.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna rush through so we have a few minutes for questions, and I want to start out by acknowledging our partnership at SCELC, not just with OCLC but with East on this grant-funded work funded by the IMLS. And I think I'm going to parallel a lot of the findings of Lynn's work in this area. And this is similar to Lynn, who has a report online. This is also a preview of a more deep dive into this topic tomorrow with members of our community council project. And there's also a link here where you can keep up with this work. Okay, did it move? So just noting, this project is really informed by our community council. We had a couple of really overarching goals here to expand diversity. We heard that as one of the pain points of the program. SCELC has 3 million retention commitments. Those expire in 9 years. So we were looking at this from the lens of program expansion to make sure that we had collection diversity of participation, and also understanding what the future was going to be when 3 million retention commitments expired. So to do this work, we had existing program reviews and then brought in a community council of representatives from minority serving institutions to help us support extension of this program into the minority serving institution realm. And we started with this question of how should we approach this work? And they gave us the advice of listening, asking, learning, et cetera, and told us instead of designing for people, you include people in the design process. So that's been instrumental in how we think about shared print service to minority serving institutions. So some of the things that we heard, again, parallel here to Lynn's findings, so I won't spend too much time on them, but noting here access. We heard put the share in shared print a lot, and networking, again. People are investing in programs where they feel like they're going to have not just access, but also growth of their networks with other libraries. The barriers, again, staffing and expertise. We have many small libraries in SCELC, and folks need support in order to complete these projects. Oftentimes there's a critical staff person who's involved in this work. Maybe they were there when the Green Glass report was run, and then they're gone, and the project is at jeopardy. The retention commitments could be delayed because critical staff people leave in small environments. And then from the MSI community in particular, there's this necessity to build trust in the community. So that people make decisions to weed, to withdraw, based on, trust that other people will hold on to items. Solutions or opportunities. People, again, want to expand participation, build expertise in networks. This was a difficult question for us, and we're going to dive into it again tomorrow with our community council. How should organizations like SCELC and East work on program expansion? Is there really a need, or should we be supporting other organizations like the HBCU Library Alliance in building new programs? So excited to talk to you about that and for you to check out the report on how that works.
And again, don't focus solely on preservation as a core benefit to note in a shared print program. That's difficult. We were waiting also on this CDL program and being able to talk about leveraging 3 million retention commitments into a CDL framework. And you know, we're all stalled there. Highlight impacts of diversity, emphasize the role of resource sharing, highlight how the project reflects their values and needs as an institution and not just as a library. So making sure that in talking about the benefits of the program, that you're talking at the level of administration about what they value and need in a collection, and noting professional relationships with peers. For example, at SCELC, we have a developing HSI, or Hispanic Serving Institution, focus within our membership, and people are really looking for opportunities to collaborate on this new idea of being a Hispanic serving institution. Barriers, same thing here. We need to focus on providing detailed system support. At SCELC, we have, similar to the Ontario infrastructure, everybody on a different platform. In order to move forward and be successful in an environment where there are limited staff, we really need to be experts in data support across multiple systems. We're going to get you a couple questions. And so as we move forward, some of the things in our collection analysis piece and the community involvement has shown us is that being involved in shared print and recruiting minority serving institutions or historically marginalized communities into our program, we started to shift our focus. So it wasn't just about program expansion, but starting to find ways to think about what benefits the program itself can provide to minority serving institutions. And we've seen that in our data. We have seen through the lens of East and their HBCU participation that there are many, many books out there that are not part of shared print preservation programs, and that working collaboratively through these multiple shared print programs, we'd really like to focus on preservation of these materials. And so wrapping up, here are some ideas that we have, I think, that align with the future of how we have a better, broader perspective of shared print. We are looking at how to preserve these materials, ensuring 100% retention of titles that have an emphasis or interest by African American communities, by communities of color. Re-looking at our retention model fundamentally, so getting away just from the last copy idea, but also really looking at collection diversity as an element of preservation. And there we go. Thank you.
So we have a few minutes for any questions for any of us or any comments that you may have.